difficulties that could be potentially resolved. For example, if you would not be able to hear members of the board or items such as that, those would be the kinds of things that you could put into chat so that Mr. Lewis could notify us so that we could make adjustments here in the meeting room. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Mrs. Weiss to continue on with the meeting.
Okay, and just to clarify, we do not have any resident participation this evening, correct? Mrs. Weber?
Correct. No emails, nothing in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, on to the superintendent's agenda, Mr. Forstoffel.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. I want to give a quick update. Certainly, we welcomed our students and staff back from a much needed break for spring break. We're thrilled that everyone's back. We're back in the flow again. Just a couple of quick updates. So Mr. Lewis, if you wouldn't mind, flip, if you're running the, go to the next one. As we've been communicating pretty clearly, and I want to thank our partners with TriHealth for helping us vaccinate our staff at 81% of our staff. Now there's some numbers, folks that are not included in that number, individuals like substitutes, some of our coaches that are not regular employees or education members. So when you put all that number in there, that number is north of 81%. We are thrilled with that number. We thought the process went incredibly well. And fluid. I need to thank several people at the district office, Mrs. Spencer, Ms. Bonbright, Mrs. Weber, for their work in assisting this vaccination process move forward. So we're humbled and we feel very privileged to be able to receive the vaccine. Since the last Board of Education meeting, I'm sure you're aware that the CDC has updated their recommendations around social distancing, which we were doing anyway. And doing it incredibly successfully. So we're continuing to keep an eye on that moving forward. What we want to make sure that we're doing with any kind of recommendation is we continue to want to communicate to our staff and our students, do not let your guard down. Okay, we've had an incredibly successful school year because of how we've handled the healthy protocol. Now's not the time to relax, and we're not doing that. So I need the community to know that. We want this next couple of months to close what we believe has been a very successful school year. And the way to do that is if we all join together and make sure we continue the good work around our healthy protocols. So just a couple of updates, Mr. Lewis, if you flip it, a couple of data points that we wanted to share. Up until from the beginning of the school year until now, less than 7% of our students and staff have tested positive for COVID from the beginning of the year. That's an extraordinary number. And that speaks to what we know when we started this year were some outstanding and thoughtful protocols put in place in our schools. And I need to thank our students and staff and everybody involved for doing that. And then finally, we've updated, so as you're aware, we updated our quarantine process and we moved away from the 14-day. We've moved now to two options, a 10-day quarantine. Without a test and symptom-free, they can come back, or a 7-day quarantine with a negative test at either day 5 through 7, they can return to day 8. And we believe that'll be really successful for us. DART team's done an amazing job of advising us as we make decisions. It's a good safety net for us to listen to the health expert. And they've really assisted us in making very strategic and important decisions for our school district.
Mr. Forstoffel,
Yes.
if I might add,
Yep.
kudos to your team. That 7%, we still have no evidence of in-school transmission. So that 7% is still outside of our protocol. So
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Curry. Absolutely.
I just want to say, it's amazing if we think about where we were a year ago when all of this started and where we are right now. And thank you, Mr. Forstoffel, to you and your team. Just the effort, the incredible effort that everyone has put in this year is remarkable. And I think, the statistics that you just told us, speak to how successful we've been and how methodical we've been about the decisions that have been made. So thank you very much to you and your team.
You're welcome. We got some school year left. I want it to end in a good way, and it will. I'm very confident. So thank you. I appreciate the time.
And Ms. Ford, I'm sorry, I'm going to pile on that one too, the whole team, because just when I talk to other people across the country about their kids and in the school and stuff like that, I think they wish they had the the same continuity and the ability to make the trade-off between in school, out of school, and that's that feeling of safely and safety that the community feels as well. So just kudos across the board for getting to where we are, and you'll finish strong, I know.
Okay. moving
Quickest
on.
Healthy Abe's update.
Yeah, that's right. Whew. All right, moving on. I need a motion for the approval of the SHP Agreement Amendment for Transportation and Maintenance Facility Design.
So moved.
Seconded.
So I will turn this over to Mr. Lewis and Mrs. Weber as we look at some ideas around transportation and maintenance.
Yeah, just a quick update. We obviously need SHP to work with us on the design of the transportation and maintenance facility. Our legal counsel, I think, looking at the proximity to Sims Elementary, just grabbed the Sims Elementary contract and decided that that would be the most logical place to put the amendment to the contract. So you can see in the amendment agreement, and the request is for an amount not to exceed $248,000 and some change, just basically for them to help us with that design and work through that project. As you're aware, we estimated approximately $3 million to be able to work on building that facility. So this is obviously to compensate them for those design services, engineering services, and anything in regards to building that transportation and maintenance facility.
Mr. Lewis, I just want to clarify, this will not be billed at Sims at all.
That's correct. It is not going to be built at Sim. I think just again, close proximity, as we work to develop, and, when we're able to let our community know where that will be, when we close in on that situation, that it will not be built on a school property. How's that? I think that'll give some good feelings to people that we do not want it on a current school property. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. Any other questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Mercurio,
Aye.
Mr. Ballard,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Comer,
Aye.
and Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of amendment number 2, CMR agreement for HTC construction Sycamore High School renovation project.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Lewis?
So I know you've received a lot of information and a lot of detailed information, really at the highest level for our community. This next agreement, we've had 2 previous GMPs for the high school, and they were both about, really getting us started, getting the project kicked off, getting temporary classrooms and temporary spaces designed and built. This one is approximately $18 million that, is the majority of the interior and exterior work that needs to be done, the renovation work that needs to be done in the high school. What it excludes is, we're still working towards the design and work for the athletic facilities and some of the other exterior spaces that still need to be designed and really vetted through our process. It doesn't include furniture and a few other pieces that are still being worked on throughout the high school. But, this is the majority of the work. I can confidently say that the pricing came in a little better than what we had expected. And, we're hopeful that that will allow us to still absorb some of the additional things that we would like to do. This price also does not include any alternate pricing that we took or that have been bid. There were approximately 20 plus alternates that were taken through the bid packages. There were over 50 bid packages that were put out, and then 25 additional bid packages for alternates. We did not take any alternates at this time. There's still some evaluation that needs to happen. Obviously, when we're looking at spending additional dollars, we want to make sure that we're getting everything we want in the design of the building and making sure that we're getting the building that we know that we should deliver to the community. So we're really, looking hard at those alternates, and we'll make some recommendations of change orders if we believe any of those alternates should move forward at a later date. So again, exciting next step at the high school to get the majority of the work under contract with HGC and again, really appreciate the number of bids that we got in for each of the bid packages, because again, I think competition drives our pricing for us. So, I'm very, Mrs. Weber and I keep saying it's, we should celebrate that we have been able to be successful in getting really a lot more scope for still staying under budget and staying on time and getting things done in a timely manner. So again, kudos to our entire district team, our district steering team, our team from SHP, and our construction team from HGC for all their work. So appreciate the ability to move this forward.
All right, any questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Any questions or comments from the board? No. Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
And Mr. Mercurio.
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the contract with Pinnacle Paving and Sealing for district paving projects.
So moved.
Seconded.
So bids have come in for district paving projects. Mr. Lewis, would you like to give kind of an overview of where we're at? So
Well, I get so excited about paving. So I don't know why, but it's my favorite time of the year. And my goal every year is to always beat everyone else out to market. So we were able to do that again. We were able to get our bids out early, and we opened our bids early March. And it was on my birthday. So it was like a double celebration. So, and you can see the pricing came in really well. We worked with Pinnacle Paving last year. Our base bid came in at 104 and our advertised cost was 148. So we are going to be able to pick up some additional paving at Montgomery and stay within our budget. And it also includes a $10,000 allowance in that number. So if we don't spend it, we get that $10,000 back. This really encompasses the major work that needs to be done. As you're aware, we have a lot of paving that'll go on at the 4 buildings that we're doing construction at. So Mrs. Weber always challenges me and says, if you're going to do this much paving again, is there a chance that we may not be able to do any paving next year? And I would say that possibility is very real. So we may be able to take a year off from paving next year. That'll be a sad day for me, but everybody else from a budget standpoint will appreciate it. So
Next year's about me.
fair enough.
Any questions or comments from the board? All right, Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mercurio.
Aye.
And Mrs. Weiss.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the agreement with final forms.
So moved. Second.
we are recommending the renewal of our annual agreement with Final Forms. As you know, this is our online student form completion. It's been in place for a few years. I think it's been received really well, just make things more fluid for our parents and families. So we've been happy with their service.
And this year it was a lifesaver
Oh.
to not have to handle paper, to be able to do everything electronically. So I'm glad that we had everything in place
Yeah.
prior to this year as well.
And I would just chime in that that we've been using it for the registration process. And I will tell you, I think parents really appreciate and value the ability to not have to make an appointment and come in and, be able to do everything virtually. We've really made it a streamlined process. And I've heard so many positive comments from our community members that, Mr. Forstoff and I discussed, continuing on with that process and allowing them to, we always believe a personal touch is great, but what we've understood is our parents are busy and they really appreciate the ability to get this done without making the appearance. So.
Great. Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Ballard,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Mr. Evans,
Aye.
Mr. Mercurio,
Aye.
and Mrs. Weiss.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the 2021 summer school tuition.
So moved. Second.
I'd like to take just a moment, if you allow me, to just kind of give some of the highlights of the plans for summer school moving forward. As you know, Mr. Evans, you commented about continuity and consistency of instruction and learning. Certainly that's what we want to do for this summer. And certainly to ensure that for those students that may need some extra support coming out of the school year, we provide them the resources in our staff to get them to where they need to be. So just technical things first. We are planning 4 to 5 weeks of summer school, K4, 5-8, 9-12, all starting June 14th. We're in the process of figuring out staffing for that. We're really focusing a lot on really digging into the data at our buildings on those intervention needs for our students. So we're utilizing MAP where there's might be some significant gaps for our students, and looking at kind of that first wave of students that may need some intense intervention in reading and math, or both. And so our teachers and principals are looking at that. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're really looking at identifying, based on what we've learned from the data, the specific skills, obviously, that our students need that intervention. We're going to cluster students around those skills. So say we have a cluster of students that need fluency skills, and that would be more of an early elementary student. We're going to cluster those kids together. And so we can divide that intense and later intervention for those students as well. We are going to roll out, so that would be kind of that data-focused qualification for intervention. We're not going to ignore the expertise of our teachers. So if we've got some students that didn't hit those data marks, but our teachers know that certain students could use an additional boost, we're going to allow our teachers to make those recommendations as well. And then we're going to allow parents, and if they think there's an additional level that they think their children could use a boost, we're going to invite them to enroll their students in the summer school as well. So we're trying to look at it in 3 tiers, right? And we think we're going to be able to deliver these services well. It's going to be face-to-face, so we're going to keep our numbers low. We think that's a good thing. Make sure we're healthy protocols. So right now we're kind of in the process of, once the enrollment starts to get out, then we got to figure out staffing as it relates to how we handle those staffs as well. So logistics, again, we're going to keep our numbers low. We're going to do it as much as we can in a face-to-face model while keeping kids and staff healthy. We are going to embed some social and emotional and mindfulness activities into our summer school. Please keep in mind, we may have some students coming into summer school this year that may not have been in school physically for a while. So we want to make sure we're taking care of those students as well. Our staff will start looking at, the Ohio Department of Education has put out what they're calling power standards. Those are our most critical standards moving forward. And our staff will kind of look at those as well. And then once we deliver the interventions, we're going to administer the assessments again, whether that be MAP or whatever. And then we're going to funnel that to next year's teachers so they know exactly where those kids are when we start a new school year. In terms of fees, we will waive any student that takes K-8 intervention or K-12 ESOL, and we will fund that through our federal ESSER money. So, Mrs. Wagner, I know you've worked really hard on this. Or anything you want to share? And I know Mrs. Neighbors been deeply involved in this as well. Did I miss anything as it relates to the description of what we're going to offer?
No, you did not, Mr. Forstoffel. The only thing I might add is that we are also going to be offering enrichment opportunities for students, as well as we have in the past. So that is still going to be an offering for our families. And in relation to the intervention pieces, again, what's different from last year than this year is that we're going to be just even more intentional about those power standards and clustering those students based on their need, and just be more strategic about those tiers.
So Mrs. Weber, I didn't know if you have anything to share related to the financial aspects of these. I know you worked really hard on the tuition fee structure.
I don't know that I have much to add. I do know that one of the things that we typically look at, particularly with those enrichment programs, is will they cover their cost? And they typically have in the past. The only thing I guess that's, the wild part at this point is whether being in person, whether we will have families that will choose to take advantage of those programs. And I still think that we will. So that would be one piece. And then I do think also that by utilizing those federal funds and taking away any kind of barrier from cost to be able to participate in those programs, I think that's a really effective use of those dollars. And so I'm glad to be able to recommend to that board, and I hope that you will approve providing those intervention and ESOL programs through federal funds. And I do think it also really aligns with what the governor has asked for extended learning plans across the state to be able to provide that as an extra support for our kids to help, close those gaps that they're going to have potentially going into next year.
I have a few quick questions on it. First one, for the intervention part, you mentioned some cohorts that teachers will have some recommendations, parents can have some recommend. Will all recommendations or students that apply for intervention be at no charge, whether it's coming from students?
That was the thought, that
Okay.
Yes,
any child that would be enrolled in an intervention or ESOL course, however that happens, it would be provided with federal funding.
And then the next question would be, I would expect that our numbers could be potentially higher. And there won't be any gates or any enrollment caps. We are committing to find the staff to meet the need
yeah.
of the number that need intervention.
We're gonna do our very best, but I will say that, I am watching. We've been so blessed in years past to have our staff be willing and really, we've never had trouble staffing summer school. But understand, of course, now, our staff has been through the most unique and challenging school year they've ever had. So I don't know what impact that would have on our ability to staff. I don't know that.
I think, the purpose of that CARES funding is to support things as you are allocating for this exact type of work. So I guess I would just say, I would hate to see a student that wants intervention not be able to get that
We're
opportunity
gonna do our very best.
because we don't have the staff to do it.
We're very
If
best.
we need creative solutioning, I'd be supportive of any
The team's
solutions
looking at it.
you found.
I have one quick question on the health and physical education part of the summer program. Do we expect that to change this year with the waiver coming in place? And just letting people understand that there may be a different way to fulfill that without, and take some impact off the teacher side of it as well.
Yeah, Mrs. Wagner, I believe that's an online course, right? Health and PE, we deliver that remotely. It's typically done that way, I think. I don't know, but maybe that's a communication thing we need to think about as
And
we
with the waiver.
push out
impact
information. Yep. So we'll build that into, making sure people are aware that there could be options to attain that credit as another way. Good point.
Lots of good things happening this summer in Sycamore.
Team's done a great job.
Thank you, everyone, for your work on that, Mrs.
Thank
Neighbor
you.
and Mrs. Wagner. And Mrs. Weber. Weber and Wagner and Neighbor, got them all. Right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Comer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercurio? Mrs. Weiss?
Aye,
And Mr. Ballas?
Aye.
motion passes. Mr. Forstoffel?
I do have one. One of the greatest joys I have is to read a list of students that have achieved at an incredible level. So I'm going, if you'll grant me just an opportunity to do that. 28 of our DECA students have qualified for the international competition. That's amazing.
Wow.
That's fantastic. So if you'll just give me the opportunity, I'd just like to share those students' names. Mrs. Weber, you can, if you want to enter them in the minutes, that's certainly fine. So those students who are qualifying for international competition and through DECA are Aaron Vida, Ethan Gauze, Jeremy Newman, Josie Zink, Ashley Walker, Claire Berlier, Palash Kapoor, Josie Allen, Gemma Pooley, Alex Dio, Ben Liu, Noah Bennett, Kira Millerchip, Carissa Lumbee, Maya Setherman, Sydney Skinner, Jacob Fleck, Luke Anderson, Maya Reardon, Ellie Fisher, Ella Schulte, Connor Christensen, Nabina Allen, Patrick Downhauer, Audrey Stamen, Michael Nold, Peter Hosfeld, and Claire Nenev. Out of those qualifiers, we had 5 first place qualifiers, and those were the first names I mentioned: Aaron, Ethan, Jeremy, Josie, Ashley, Claire, and Palash. Fantastic work. Awesome job. How they do it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, good work. And Mr. Steedley, our fantastic teacher, marketing teacher at the high school, does an amazing job. So congratulations to him and his students.
It's a great program.
Yep.
And that's a great cooperative program with Great Oaks.
Exactly. Thank you for reminding me.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. Thank you, Mr. Forstoffel. I need a motion for the approval of the treasurer's consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Just a few things to point out in the consent agenda. Most of them are on item number 3, appropriation increases. You can see the building construction we've added to the budget in order to pay for the green and junior high construction projects that were approved at the last meeting. And then the increase to the building improvements is based on the additional renovations at Sims Elementary School. Under auxiliary services, that is the additional budget for what is typical allocation for our auxiliary services schools, which are Muller, Ursuline, and CHCA, and the Blue Ash Educational Building, and those state monies that we administer for them on an annual basis that support services as well as oftentimes curricular materials and equipment. Under emergency relief fund, that is a reallocation of actually the very first round of ESSER monies that we received from the state. They did open up some allocation from what would have been dollars going to our non-public schools, and those have been made available for us at the public school level. So we are utilizing those dollars for services that had already been obligated and that we were going to utilize our general fund reserve to fund this year. Then also you see a reduction in the special instruction area. Those were dollars that we had set aside in the event that we needed to provide additional time and services from our special education department for recovery services for students. And we did not need to utilize those in that fashion, but we did reallocate some of those dollars into people support areas to provide some other types of supports for our students with disabilities. And then the instructional support area is to help us fund some services for our tech supports that we had initially planned that we were going to have to utilize general fund dollars for. So that's all good news. I do want to point out that one of the items that we had hoped we would be able to have on this agenda is an appropriation increase for round 2 of ESSER monies, which is about $1.3 million. It's not on this agenda, along with what we will see as a reduction in our general fund budget, because the state has not yet approved our grant. We submitted it back at the end of February and it has not been approved yet. The reason for that is when the state initially did their budget for this year, they did not budget enough in ESSER monies because they didn't know that they were going to be available. And there's actually a bill right now in the Senate to be able to increase the appropriation statewide to be able to release those funds to the schools. So we anticipate that happening fairly soon. I think it might have actually been passed out of the Senate today. I know it was on their schedule, but it's kind of like until they can do something like this, they're not releasing the monies to the school districts. But we don't think that there's any issue with our grant application whatsoever. It's more just kind of a technical budgeting issue at the state level. So once that occurs, we will approve those additional funds to our budget from the federal standpoint, and then also reduce our general fund budget in an offsetting manner for that. So that is all I have on the treasurer's consent agenda.
Okay, any questions from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Ballant,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Mr. Evans,
Aye.
Mr. Mercurio,
Aye.
and Mrs. Weiss.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the February 2021 financial reports.
So moved.
Second.
One of the things I'd like to point out is just we're continuing to monitor our real estate taxes, our collections, And you can see that they are a bit below as of February. At the end of February, they are a bit below where they were at this point in time last year, about $7 million. But what has also occurred since the end of February is that we've collected about another 7.4 million, which basically takes away that variance. So we are right on track with real estate collections. You can see that we're still, I think, in good shape in terms of expenses for this point in time of the year. We did also on the revenue side receive a portion of the state budget cut that we had experienced earlier in the year. We did receive some of those funds back from the state as they executed the governor's executive order to reimburse or to reinstate those dollars back to public school districts. So keeping right on track. We'll continue to monitor. So good news through February.
Thank you, Mrs. Weber. Any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye.
Mr. Mercurio.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
And Mr. Evans.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the personnel consent agenda, including items on the addendum 2C, 3A, B, and C.
Second.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
And Mr. Mercurio.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to other Board of Education business, legislative liaison report, Mr. Mercurio.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick, but we did have our representative meetings with Senators Blessing and Wilson and Representative Jessica Miranda. Ms. Weber, I'm gonna let you talk about the funding bill with the conversation with Miranda and Blessing.
Okay, thank you.
I will just cover,
Okay.
House Bill 67 passed, which is mandates state testing. As you may have heard, the Biden administration mandated standardized exams this school year despite the pandemic, but offered significant flexibility in how those tests will be given. A quote in a statement from an official with the federal department: state assessment and accountability systems play an important role in advancing educational equity. So we'll be moving forward with state tests, but there is significant amount of flexibility in how those are administered, but they do need to be in person. I wanted to cover with Senator Wilson, our meeting. He brought up Senate Bill 1, which is regarding teaching financial literacy in high school. This is a bill that he had mentioned to us that he had been working on for the past 5 years. And he's really proud that it's gotten to this point. He is a primary co-sponsor of the bill. And what the bill would require is 60 hours of instruction, or basically a semester credit for graduation. Currently, the bill is in the Senate committee. The bill has now entered its 4th Senate committee hearing. And there's been 25 witness testimony. And so far, no one has offered opponent testimony to the bill. In light of our SAC research on the subject, I think it was at our last evening meeting, I wanted to get your thoughts about sharing the presentation and our research with the senator's office. If we do so, he may ask for supporting testimony. It's possible. And I have spoken, thanks to Mr. Comerford for connecting me with Eric Ross, who's presented before our group before on another SAC presentation. And he would be willing to support that effort if we saw it as a team that we'd want to move forward with that. I see it as a chance to foster a two-way relationship, not always asking for something, but able to show some support for something that he's been working on for some time. But we all need to be on the same page with that. I can send out the bill summary if everybody wants to see that. Mr. Forstoffel, I'm looking to you. If your thoughts on if there's anything we can do to rally around that with Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of sharing the presentation. I think that's a good place. I think Senator Wilson would be very accepting of that, you know, and I think, I'm not sure when additional testimony will be heard, but I think there's an opportunity to do that. I think the key component would be the who up to do that. I think it would be interesting to have maybe a different person other than the superintendent or treasurer offer testimony, maybe give a different perspective. That's probably who they're hearing from now, right? Superintendent. So, which is fine,
Right.
there might be a different look at it.
And Mr. Ross is perfectly competent and
No,
capable.
he's great.
And
Great
I
guy.
know he's a professional financial planner and he would be an excellent representative of Sycamore.
I can help with that. Mr. McCarron, do you know if this would be an additional requirement, you know, for 21 credits to graduate, or, you know, at 22 credits? Any idea on that structure? Is it too early?
I don't know about that structure. I know it's in addition to, if you recall, that financial literacy was required to be part of a government class, and it is in addition to that.
That would be what I'm concerned. Yeah, I would just wonder about, you know, because we do offer a lot of electives, and it's nice for kids to have that opportunity.
Yeah,
And
and we
squeeze
just
that in.
brought in the PE waiver, and then, you know, here's a semester credit hour for this, you know, and there's still online options for that, you know, as well.
Okay, that would be my
Yeah.
one concern on just that aspect of it.
That's my recollection, is that it's an additional requirement, but it's not an overall addition to the number of credits required to
Okay.
graduate. So he really is taking an elective
Yeah.
slot.
Yep.
So I know that the only concerns that are really out there are just number one, additional coursework, additional staff for districts across the state. These are the things I'm hearing across the state. If they don't have staff that are able to teach it. But I'm also hearing, and you're probably hearing this too, Mr. Forstoffel, is that they're looking at this also as potentially a way to either maybe substitute for a math credit or potentially for a social studies credit. You know, I think they're looking at ways that it might also be, as opposed to an elective, being one of the credits for graduation or one of the core areas. So there's a lot of work on it. I think that's probably where they're stumbling in getting it across the finish line. It's just figuring out how it's going to fit within the graduation requirements overall.
It was very timely with the research work that our Sycamore Advisory Commission had done this spring. They just made the presentation in February, and I know there was a lot of energy from that subcommittee on the importance of financial education. So I think it's a nice tie. Just to answer your question, I did thank you for sharing the proposed linkage, and I think there's a lot to support. I think you're right, John, that oftentimes we come to our legislative partners with asks. It's great that we can offer up perhaps some help.
Right. And, you know, they also want to have that. I think the reason for the bill is because they want to bring in a professionally trained person to actually deliver that education. You know, you don't always, you know, we might not have somebody that's specifically trained in financial literacy that might be the best fit for that. So I think that's why it's there. I know that to fund that, to actually pay for the training, they are allocating like $1.5 million from the unclaimed fund for this, so districts can be reimbursed. And, you know, if we have somebody doing that work, to be able to be trained. But I think it does highlight, you know, how important, I mean, you read about it today, young people, and, you know, with this Reddit investment, and, you know, they're legalizing sports gambling across the country in all the states. Young people are having to make decisions with big, high stakes decisions with money. And this is really important, not necessarily all the adults. Mr. Ross pointed out, not all adults are really good with making those kinds of decisions. So this is kind of an important part of financial literacy education for students. So thanks for that. We'll go ahead and share and we'll connect Mr. Forsyth on the next steps. Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mercurio.
Mrs.
Mrs. Weber, do you
Weber,
have anything you'd like to add?
Right now, the state budget bill is still in the House of Representatives, which really is about the right timing for the process. They're right on schedule. And they have not yet released what would be their substitute bill, which would be the revisions to the governor's initial proposal. But we fully anticipate that it's going to be the fair school funding update, so we don't really think that it's going to be much different than what we've already seen. The Senate, we have heard, is working on a companion bill, is probably not the right word, but they're working on their own school funding bill that we think will combine some of the components of that plan, as well as looking at what their concerns are, which really center around affordability of the plan overall. So we're waiting on that. I think that I mentioned at our last meeting that Senator Blessing is chairing the K-12 school finance subcommittee. So as our senator, I think it's been great to be able to already have a good relationship with him, and to be able to continue to be able to be in touch with him about the development of the Senate's plan and how that's going to fold in with the House. And I'm also working with some of the treasurers from the area, and I believe there are a couple of superintendents on it as well. And we're working directly with Senator Blessing to try to make sure he knows the impact of what they're doing in the Senate versus what they're looking at in the House. We anticipate that there will be a virtual meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks that we will invite you as board members to attend if you have the time, to be able just to get an update, as well as to hear what Senator Blessing's concerns are about the state budget in general, and how the Senate plans to address school funding in their version of the bill. So that'll be coming soon. I think they're getting ready to go on recess the next couple of weeks. So there won't be a lot of activity, but after the 1st of April, we anticipate that the whole school funding and state budget piece will come back into play. At that point in time, we'll have to determine whether it would be worthwhile for us to go up and provide any testimony. We can also provide written testimony if that's something that we would choose to do. So we'll just keep you in the loop on what we think will be most effective and most important for us as a school district to do going forward.
and I would just add on at the end there that there's a lot of optimism around the funding bill this time that there's been in a long time. And the two bills, House and Senate, Cups on the one side and Matt Huffman, I think, is on the other, and they don't quite agree, but they think they're going to make some progress on the report card, the formula, and the cap and guarantee. And they pointed out that they went to high school together, so they think that might be promising.
Yeah.
They're friends,
Or preschool together. I mean,
preschoolers. They go back
together, but
Preschool.
well, I don't know. Maybe not. They're both. Maybe not.
They're up from
They go
Lima.
to preschool.
to.
But they've known each other for a long, long time.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Weber and Mr. Mercurio. All right, moving on to the Sycamore Advisory Commission report, Mr. Comerford.
Yes, we met on Monday, March 8th, and we had an excellent presentation on the topic of remote learning beyond COVID. A very well done presentation. Our plan in April is to have a presentation on a multi-tiered compensation strategy for administrative staff. So looking forward to that presentation the next month.
Right, thank you very much. All right, strategic planning update, Mr. Forstoffel.
Yeah, just briefly, all the strategic planning project leadership teams will have their first kickoff meeting within the next week. So they'll be off and running under the guidance and counsel of LEI. So we're looking forward to getting them off and running.
All right, moving on to superintendent search update. The board has completed their first round of interviews earlier today. The finalist candidate list will be announced this Friday to the staff and community. And final interviews will occur next week on March 30th. And the board anticipates a selection of a new superintendent sometime next week. All right, Mr. Forstoffel, do you have anything else?
I have nothing else.
Anyone from the board? Mrs. Weber? All right, meeting adjourned.